Hello peeps and welcome back to Big Deck Playa with me, Matt Sparks. On today's show, a Hunter deck. This was posted on Hearthstone by GoogerNaughtGod, and this was taken from a Reddit post from the TF2 and gaming personality Ruskeydoo, and this is his Renogg Hatson. Okay, there's a lot of cards in this deck because there's no duplicates, so this is going to take a while to get through, so let's get cracking. Alright, first off we have Hunter's Mark. Changes a minion's health to 1, which is quite useful in this deck because there's some other cards that this works very well with, and it's good for getting rid of really big things and big threats on the board. So Finley Mergleton, also at 1 mana, discover a new basic hero power. Now, it might be best to go with the mage hero power if you can get it. Obviously you only get a choice of 3, and that might not be one of the other ones that you can acquire. You don't really need card draw too much in this deck because you're playing on curve a lot of the time. There's lots of cards. I generally don't think you'll need card draw, so Warlock maybe not. So maybe Priest or Warrior if you can't get the mage one. Also at 2 mana we have a Bear Trap. In fact, before we talk about the Bear Trap, let me just go up a couple to Explorer's Hat, because this is the hat part of the Renogg Hatson deck. So this gives a minion +1/+1, and the death rattle is that the hat comes back into your hand. Every time you use the Explorer's Hat, you're casting a spell. So if you use that Explorer's Hat 5 times in a game, that's 5 spells that you've cast, which ties in quite nicely to Yogg'Saron, should you manage to draw him. So with Bear Trap or Sir Finley Mergleton, I mean ideally you want to get in your mulligan, you want to get Sir Finley Mergleton, a Bear Trap, and maybe the Explorer's Hat. Explorer's Hat you definitely need in your starting hand or very soon after, because the earlier you can get it, the more often you can use it. This deck has a few legendaries in, so it can be quite expensive. Just warning you now. Blood Mage Thalnos though is from the original vanilla version of Hearthstone, so chances are if you've been playing for a while you probably have Blood Mage Thalnos by now already. And obviously you get he draws a card when he dies, and if you put the Explorer's Hat on him, he's a 2/2, and you get the hat back again when he dies. I've found that he's been very, very useful. Not to play necessarily early game, he's been pretty useful to play in combination with some of the other spells in this deck, because he's only 2 mana, so by the time you get to late game, you maybe just need that extra bit of damage. That's where it can come from. Also at 2 mana we have the Explosive Trap. When your hero gets attacked, does 2 damage to all enemies. That's standard Hunter deck kind of stuff. We have a King's Elic at 2 mana. Now I guess this is kind of to try and pull your Yogg, if you can. But you've got quite a few other high cost creatures in this deck, so even if you don't get Yogg'Saron, you might get something equally good, perhaps. Or being Hearthstone, you'll get Sir Finley Mergleton. That's the way this game works there, isn't it? At 2 mana we have Quick Shot. Deal 3 damage if your hand is empty, draw a card. Your hand won't be empty. It's very unlikely that your hand will be empty, unless it's like getting really late in the game. Also at 2 mana we have a Wild Pyromancer. This works very well with Hunter's Mark and the Explorer's Hat. Make sure that you put the Explorer's Hat on the Wild Pyromancer first. Wild Pyromancer works really, really well in this deck. Also, at 3 mana we have an Acolyte of Pain, which with the Wild Pyromancers out and the Acolyte of Pains out means you're going to get a card draw off of it, which combos quite nicely too. At 3 mana we have an Animal Companion, just the one because it's a Reno deck, so we need to make sure that Reno's ready to rock. Pretty standard Hunter stuff though. Also at 3 mana we have a Deadly Shot, trying to eliminate the weaker targets on the board first, and then so that your opponent only has 1 thing left, and then use the Deadly Shot to take it out. At 3 mana we have a Dread Scale, so at the end of each turn, at the end of your turn, sorry, not each turn, deal 1 damage to all other minions. Again, very nice to combo with Hunter's Mark or the Acolyte of Pain for card draw. Pretty cool. Or if you just need to weaken stuff for an Explosive Trap, all very viable, especially with the amount of kind of aggro decks there seem to be around. Dreadscale is actually quite useful. We have 1 Eaglehorn Bow, so my suggestion is to, unless you really need to use it, try and get the traps out at the same time so you get the durability back. 1 kill command, so provided you have a beast on the board it does 5 damage, otherwise it does 3. This combos quite nicely on turn 5 if you need to do 4 damage to something, you don't have anything on the board, Blood Mage Thalnos, kill command, all good. Something else to combo with Blood Mage Thalnos is the Power Shot at 3 mana. Deal 2 damage to a minion and to the minions next to it, so it's like a mini explosive shot. Also at 3 mana we have Unleash the Hounds. This card's been around for ages, you don't need me to tell you that it's good. And obviously it combos quite nicely with the hat, because it means that one of your Unleash the Hounds can do 2 damage on that turn. So if you need to do 2 damage to something to get rid of it, Unleash the Hounds and Explorer's Hat and you're good to go. At 4 mana, we're up to 4 mana now. Elise Starseeker, 3/5 for 4, shuffles the map to the Golden Monkey into your deck. The map itself is a spell, so that counts towards Yogg. So even if you don't draw the Golden Monkey himself, you've still got an extra spell out of it. At 4 mana we have a Spellbreaker. Now we haven't seen Spellbreaker get used while the Owl was around and before the Owl got nerfed. But I've noticed recently that people are playing the Spellbreaker a lot more than they used to, which is cool, because I always thought the Spellbreaker was a pretty cool card anyway. So there's one in this deck to silence something. At 5 mana we have an Azure Drake, 4/4 for 5, spell damage +1, and draws a card. And obviously combos very nicely with some of the other spells that we have in this deck. Unfortunately, Explosive Trap doesn't get any bonus from spell damage, which is a shame, because I think it probably should, but maybe that would be a bit overpowered if it did. At 5 mana, we have an Explosive Shot, which deals 5 damage to a minion and 2 damage to adjacent ones, so it's a much stronger spell than the Power Shot. And this is especially useful against Warlock Zoo decks when they play the Darkshire Council, because he has 5 health, and generally that's like the most health something is likely to have in a Warlock Zoo deck at the moment. So this will get rid of that and deal 2 damage to stuff either side of it, which will probably be a lot smaller, maybe a Knife Juggler or something like that. At 5 mana we got another legendary in the form of Harrison Jones, so this will destroy your opponent's weapon and draw you some cards. Also at 5 mana we have a Stampeding Kodo, which destroys a random enemy minion with 2 or less attack. This can be quite useful as well. Although I'm kind of tempted to swap out the Stampeding Kodo for Nexus Champion Sarad, just because I like Nexus Champion Sarad and he will give you spells. But Stampeding Kodo is quite useful because it can just kill something straight away just by playing it. I guess it's up to you really. If you have Nexus Champion Sarad, I know not everyone probably has Nexus Champion Sarad, but if you do, and maybe try it out. I think I'm going to try it out because it might be fun. At 6 mana we have a Reno Jackson, obviously, because of the name of the deck. As long as you don't have any duplicates, which in this deck you do not, he will heal you to full. Kind of want to use this as late as possible, but obviously be wary against, like, depending on who you're playing against and what they might have in their hand, and whether they might have lethal that turn. Some decks that are out there at the moment, man, they can do like 20 damage in one go, so Reno's not going to save you from that, because you'll be sitting on 20 health thinking that you're safe when you're not. Also at 6 mana we have a Sylvanas Windrunner, because it's Sylvanas. I mean, I don't need to tell you how cool Sylvanas is. She is the coolest. At 7 mana we have another legendary in the form of Baron Geddon. So in case your Dread Scale wasn't doing enough for you, or the Wild Pyromancer wasn't doing enough for you, or Explosive Shot or Explosive Trap, you get a Baron Geddon, which does 2 damage to all other characters, including the heroes. You'll take 2 damage each turn he's out, as well as your opponent. Also at 7 mana we have a Gladiator's Longbow. Now, I haven't seen Gladiator's Longbow in a deck for ages. Absolutely ages. 7 mana for 5 damage isn't fantastic, but you are immune while you're attacking, which means you don't take any damage at all. At 8 mana we have a Call of the Wild, because who doesn't want all 3 animal companions all at the same time? Especially if you can have other things on the board at the same time from the turn previous to you when you play this, because then they'll get the buff from Leok when you do play this, so they'll hit harder as well. At 8 mana we have a Ragnaros the Firelord, just in case you didn't have quite enough firepower. Let's bring out the rag. And then finally at 10 mana we have Yogg'Saron, Hope's End. Casts random spells for each spell that you've cast this game. As I mentioned earlier, for every time that you use the Explorer's Hat, that's casting a spell, a different spell. It's essentially your second hero power in this deck, the Explorer's Hat. 2 mana, use it as often as you can, make sensible trades using it. It's great. It really, really works very well in this deck. I would urge you to go and check the write-up for this over at hearthstone.com. I will put a link in the description, as always, to all of these decks. There's always a link in the description. Go and check it out, because it's a rather amusing write-up as well, which helps. There's some fantastic art of Yogg'Saron wearing a hat. So, I mean, you know, that's worth looking at in itself. Go and give it a plus rating, because it's a really cool, fun deck. It's one of the most interesting decks that I've played on Big Deck Player for some time, and I really like it, actually. It's a lot of dust to craft everything if you don't have these cards already. Obviously, you'll need League of Explorers to get a lot of the cards that are in this deck. Stuff like Sir Finley Mergleton, the Explorer's Hat, Elise Starseeker, you'll need League of Explorers for. But in total, it's 12,880 dust to craft everything, which is really expensive. But, as I mentioned earlier, you could probably replace the Stampeding Coda, maybe. And if you don't have Baron Geddon, you could maybe replace him. But I think most of the other cards are quite necessary. Obviously, you could put an Ooze in instead if you really wanted to. If you don't have Harrison Jones, but you will lose out on that card draw. Unfortunately, that's the benefit of having legendaries. They have these unique features that the other cards don't have. So that's the deck. That's the Renogg Hatson deck. I would, as I mentioned before, I would urge you to go and check it out on Hearthstone itself. And yeah, let me know how you get on if you do try this deck, or if you do make any changes. Also, let me know how they work for you. And I will see you next week for some more Big Deck Player. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.